Good evening. Welcome to the December 4th, 2018 Council Committee meeting. My name is Matt Zimmerman, Council President and Council Member from Ward 1. I will be chairing this meeting. Besides myself, the committee members here tonight are Jim Neighbor from Ward 1, Mr. Jenkins from Ward 2, Mike Kimling from Ward 2, Stephanie Meyer from Ward 3, Lisa Larson-Bonnell from Ward 3, Mr. Sander from Ward 4, and Lindsay Constance from Ward 4. Before we begin our agenda, I'd like to explain our procedures for public input. During the meeting, I will offer the opportunity for public input, and if you would like to speak to the committee at any of those times, please go to the podium. I will ask you to state your name and address for the record, then you may offer your comments. So the members of the audience can hear your comments. I would ask that you speak directly into the microphone. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes. After you are finished, please sign the form on the podium to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. We have 4 items on tonight's agenda. The first item, staff will discuss the traffic and street maintenance program. Transportation Manager Kevin Manning will provide an update on this traffic and street maintenance program. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Manning. I'm the Transportation Manager for the city. I'm going to be updating the Council Committee on our traffic improvement plan and then also the 2018 mill and overlay project and what we're planning on doing for 2019 mill and overlay. So I'll start off with the traffic improvement plan. So just to give everyone a little reminder and background, this was originally kind of conceived and developed in response to the 2015 City of Shawnee Citizen Satisfaction Survey. On that survey, the flow of traffic and congestion management was rated as the #2 most important item for city priorities. In subsequent citizen satisfaction surveys, it also ranked high. I think dropped to #3 in the last one, but was still a high priority. And so that's why that's kind of why this plan originated. So tonight I'm going to be talking about kind of 4 aspects of the plan. And those are traffic operations, safety analysis, our ADA transition plan for intersections, and then also public involvement. So starting off, this is a map of all of our signalized intersections throughout the city. All the blue stars you see are locations where we did not have signal connectivity at the start of 2016, and the red locations are places where we had basically fiber interconnect. So one of the main goals of this plan is to get that connectivity to as many of those signals as possible. That gives us a lot of different and new options. It allows us to incorporate better signal timing, and it also improves our ability to maintain those signals, helps us notice that there's a detection error out there or something like that. Or if the signal goes on flash, we can know all of that remotely and a lot of times make adjustments and address those issues remotely without having to go out in the field. There's no getting away from sometimes you always have to go out there and address it, but this helps us eliminate some of those options and just do a better job of maintaining our infrastructure as a whole. So this is the progress we made from basically 2016 and 2018. We brought another 18 locations online, up to 32 out of 61. That was primarily due to a fiber project that our IT department did, running new fiber throughout a lot of different sections of the city. So you can see we were able to get a lot of additional locations online on the east side. Where we're at right now, this is basically where we're planning on being into the first quarter of 2019. We've got about 10 locations. We're going to be trying out kind of a cellular technology, and we've got those locations identified, and we're planning on going out there in the next few weeks to maybe a few months. But basically by the end of March, we should be at about 49 out of our 61 locations online, and we've really been able to kind of get across 435, which was kind of always a challenge for us. We were able to run some additional fiber. We're actually running through the city of Lenexa down and connected down on 83rd Street, and then we're basically kind of running up approximately parallel to K7, and we'll be able to get on the west side of Shawnee Mission Parkway at Hilltop, Monticello, and then also Hilltop in Midland and 66th Street in Monticello. And so there's a variety of other locations on there that we're going to be trying out the cellular technology. And then I will say as well, as we move, it'd be nice to get this done in the first quarter, but as many of you know, we've got the water towers going in out at the service center. Part of that we're going to be putting in conduit and fiber, basically running from the service center down over to Woodland. That's going to be going north on Woodland to Johnson Drive and then over to the new fire station. So you see the blue dots on Johnson Drive at Woodland, Monticello, and Woodsonia. Those will likely be on in the near future, but we're a little bit at the mercy of that project, so I didn't want to include those right now, but those should be coming online in the near future as well. So I always like to include this graphic too. This is kind of how we compare to some of our neighbors. Olathe, Lenexa, and Overland Park all have between about 92 and 98% of their signals online. We started out the year at about 50%, but we're basically going to add about 30% on this year, so we're going to be up to about 80%. So I'm very pleased with where we're at. We're making good progress. And really, we're kind of just scratching the surface. We're kind of laying the foundation on what we can do here. Once we have a lot of these signals online, we can really start getting into some of the more exciting aspects of collecting data and using that data in interesting and kind of new ways. There's a lot of, as you can imagine, there's a lot of new technology out there and a lot of different ways that we can kind of improve traffic flow based on data from those signals. But we have to have that connectivity. And so as we continue to get our network built, once that's kind of finalized, probably over the next year or two, we're going to be able to start doing some new things, and I'll be looking forward to telling you about those in the future as well. So moving on to safety analysis, I like to show this graphic as well. We're kind of always looking at these two axes. On the y-axis here, we've got crash rate from low to high, and then on the x-axis, we've got cost. We're always looking, ideally, kind of in the green area, where if we've got a high crash rate at a location and we've got kind of a low-cost countermeasure, we're trying to identify those areas. The yellow areas are places where we have, low crash rate and maybe a low-cost countermeasure, or a high crash rate and a high-cost countermeasure. And then we generally stay out of the red quadrant, which is locations where we don't really have that much of a crash issue, or maybe it's an isolated incident and it costs a lot to address the issue. So that's kind of what we're looking at when we look at crashes. Kind of our big progress on this year was we actually went and mapped all of our crashes at signalized intersections, all 61 locations, and that ended up being over 1,000 crash reports, going in and reading those and mapping those. Luckily, we had an intern that was able to do a lot of that work for us. I was thankful for that because I think she spent 2 to 3 weeks straight working on this, and that's a lot of time. But this is exactly what helps us identify patterns. When you're looking at these, there's things that stick out. You can see on the intersection to the left, a lot of what you're seeing on kind of the east-west legs are rear-end collisions. And so we can clearly see, we have a problem there. We don't really have a problem with rear-end collisions southbound. And then kind of in the bottom left portion of that crash diagram, you can see we have very clear pattern of people coming southbound and running into people going westbound. And so by collecting this information and having it, this kind of helps us start to develop ways to address these issues. And many times this isn't a sprint necessarily. Many times, like I mentioned, we're always looking for those low-cost countermeasures, but a lot of times we have to do this within projects, and we have to apply for funding. And many times, if we're applying for state funding, that may be 2 or 3 years out. But having the information is kind of a prerequisite to being able even to apply for that funding. And so we're laying the foundation, collecting this information, compiling it, and this is going to allow us it's basically going to be a tool for us to help address these issues moving forward. And I listed some of our different countermeasures we use right here. We have put in some new signal clearance intervals this year and made some modifications to our left turn phasing. You probably noticed we've had some additional flashing yellow arrows out there. But ultimately, if we're looking at geometric improvements, if we're looking at adding turn lanes, maybe we have people that are waiting to turn left in a lane and they're getting rear-ended, and we want to add a left turn lane out there. We can't just go out there and just widen the road. That's going to have to be part of our project. And so when I talk about identifying those locations and then incorporating those into the CIP, that's how we're going to do that. So moving on to our ADA transition plan, I like to talk about why this is important. We need to document any deficiencies that we have and plan for compliance with the American with Disabilities Act and subsequent regulations that came along with that. What we're really trying to avoid here is there have been other municipalities in the Kansas City area that have had to enter into a consent decree with the Department of Justice. And what that means is they're basically obligated to spend a certain percentage of their transportation funding dollars addressing these issues every year for a certain amount of time. Those agreements are usually punitive. They kind of hamstring the city a little bit, and they probably force you to put more resources to something than you'd like. So the key here is to always be proactive, get out in front of it. If we ever have an issue brought up to us, we address it. But citywide, we're looking to basically come up with a plan and work that plan. It may be a slow process, but we need to have a plan and we need to work it. So earlier this year, I talked about we have developed a checklist and we've gone out and done inspections. So we've got a pretty good idea of where our deficiencies are at. Our major progress this year was there was some federal funding that became available. It was called Transportation Alternative Funding. And that the application process actually started in March, and it's basically a competitive funding. We're competing against other similar projects for other municipalities across Kansas, and about a 6-month-long process. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion on what projects really have merit. And our project was lucky enough to be selected for about $475,000 in federal funding. That is 2021, 2022 funding. So once again, like this is a process. It sometimes takes a little time to get there, but I don't believe the governing body has seen this on the CIP. It hasn't been included because we were basically as part of the application process, but you will see that next year. And then ultimately, of course, the project itself will have to be approved by the governing body. This would basically be a project to go in and address curb ramp issues, push button issues, sidewalk issues within about 100 feet of signalized intersections. It would be about a $600,000 project, and it would be an 80-20 federal-local split. So about $475,000 would be federal money, and the city would have to come up with $125,000 in local funding. So just wanted to kind of get that on everyone's radar. If that project were to be approved, we basically, we're going to start looking at ranking those locations next year. Design would likely start in 2020, and we'd be looking at construction in 2021, once again, if that project was approved. So finally, the last item is public involvement. I can't be everywhere within the city, and our staff can't be everywhere. I'm always interested to hear from the public if they're noticing a particular issue at a location, maybe a certain time of day. That information is always valuable, and so I'm in the process of just developing a survey to kind of send that out. I'm going to be sending that out before the end of this year. And what we're really interested in is just, people have concerns about traffic, but if there's some kind of pattern or something we're not seeing, we always like to hear about that, and we'd like to incorporate that into our plan. So just in summary, our plan kind of consists of these 4 components: traffic operations, safety analysis, ADA transition plan, and public involvement. I think we made some good progress this year, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Well done. Any questions or comments from the council? Yes, Lisa.
Briefly, can you tell me how much of this data that you've presented has been made public? I'm particularly interested in that really cool chart that you showed us with the crash analysis by intersection.
Yeah, so I believe a lot of that information is protected by state law against disclosure. I mean, I was comfortable putting that on there, but I kind of took the name or put the location off of that. And so generally, we would not be looking to publish specific information about an intersection necessarily.
That's fair. And is it just that you can't identify the intersection, or is it that you can't publish that data at all? I'm just trying to clarify, because you are saying that you are looking to have public input, which I think is a really great idea. And I think that that level of information is very valuable to some members of the public. If there's a state law that says that we can't do it, then that's not a problem. I'm just wondering what that state law says. Asking the attorney who's sitting over there.
Yeah, I guess I can look into that a little bit more for you. I'm not entirely familiar with the exact wording. There may be, it may be the municipality's prerogative to release the information, but I think it is best practice not to release that.
That's also a fair response. Again, I'm just asking if it is available.
I can check on that, and I will get back with the governing body on that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
Up here tonight, though, is now available because it's now.
Yep.
So you certainly have that.
Mr. Neighbor.
I'd just like, like to note the fact that overall in 2019, our street maintenance program total budget is $10,180,000, which is needed, and I'm sure will be put to good use. And I applaud the idea, we're talking about it here, I think a little later, is getting those bids out early so we can take advantage of the bids and stretch it even further.
Any other comments from council? Any comments from the public? All right, staff is recommending forwarding the proposed 2019 street maintenance program for the governing body approval with the intent of soliciting bids for the 2019 mill and overlay, sidewalk and curb replacement contract, and other various contracts provided for in the program. I'll accept a motion.
So moved. Timeout.
Excuse me, but that was just the first part of my presentation. I have a separate presentation for the mill and overlay. If the governing body would like to hear that, I'd be
Kevin, I'm sorry.
Take the guns.
Okay.
Kim was talking about.
I mean, if you want to cut me off, yeah.
That's
there you
okay,
go.
we got that done. So.
All right.
That part's out of the way.
Yeah. Okay, so now I will cover 2018 mill and overlay and also the 2019 street maintenance program in terms of what our plan is. So this figure shows kind of what our plan was in 2018 and what we completed. We had about 40, we were planning to do about 41 lane miles, and we ended up completing 49. That's fairly typical. When we kind of do our estimations at the beginning of the year, what we don't want to do is overestimate and underdeliver. Once we put something out to the public, we want to make sure we can get all those roads done. So we're generally pretty conservative in our estimates, and that's why you see we were able to, complete a little bit more than we had initially planned, and I think that's a good thing. We had about 7.5 linear feet, or 7.5 linear miles worth of curb and gutter that was replaced, and about almost 2 linear miles of sidewalk. And then we completed, based on specific customer service requests, about 1.5 miles of curb and gutter improvements, as well as a little bit under 1 mile of sidewalk improvements. We also completed about 2,900 square yards of full-depth concrete repairs. And we also, as you all know, part of our pavement sales tax was to improve a lot of our chip sealed roads. And this last year, we basically improved about 7.6 linear miles of chip seal, and we upgraded those to asphalt roadways. We also did about 27 lane miles of crack seal. One of the things we're doing as part of our mill and overlay program is we're also trying to do a few pilot projects on new pavement technologies. Those are going to be fairly small in the grand scheme of things, but what we're doing is looking at what some other municipalities are doing, and maybe even people around the country, and just seeing if we can incorporate some of those best practices or ideas into what we're doing. And that's what we did this year with MAQS, which is Modified Asphalt Quickset Surface, and it's basically designed to be kind of a thin wearing surface. We did that work out on Holiday Drive. What we needed to do that is we need a solid base where maybe just the top layer has started to degrade a little bit. By doing that modified asphalt, we can kind of extend the life of that pavement and prevent any more pavement damage underneath that top layer. And so we started a small pilot project on that this year. We were pretty satisfied as to how everything went. We're going to expand it next year. This is a specific treatment that Olathe has. They do quite a bit of work on, probably about 40 lane miles worth of work on this particular treatment every year. So they do a significant amount. We're not doing anything near that amount, but we're basically trying different things. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's one thing that we did do last year. And then in here, you also see our SIT project on Flint Street. That's getting ready to wrap up. And we also had Johnson Drive from 435 to Martindale as part of a CARS project. 59th Street, CDBG, and then we have some bridge repairs going on right now at 75th and Martindale. There were some structural issues with that bridge that had to be reduced to one lane, and so those structural issues are being addressed right now. And hopefully that bridge will be open at full capacity here in the near future. So this is a map of all the streets that we did last year. As you can see, the blue kind of off Holiday Drive just off 435 was the MAQS treatment that I discussed. And then when all the, we like I mentioned, we did about 7.6 miles of chip seal to asphalt upgrade. And what that primarily was Clare Road just south of Johnson Drive down to 63rd Street basically, and then as you can see Mize, and then also 63rd and Gleason, and then also there's a short piece of 43rd Street just to the east of K7. Those were all locations where we were previously at chip seal and they were upgraded to asphalt pavement. So I kind of like to talk about this a little bit. This was our pavement condition, our average rating, and then our percentage of streets rated 1 to 3. So as you can see, back in 2012, we were a little bit under 6, and we dropped down to about a 5 in 2016. Now that rating was basically at the beginning of the year. So the pavement tax was approved in the fall of 2014, and there was an entire year for it to basically build up in 2015. And then basically in the spring of 2016 is when we started our program. And so you can see there's been a pretty dramatic shift in 2017 and 2018. We leveled off a little bit this year. We've seen some pretty significant growth. I will say that I think we're going to see some incremental gains moving forward, but we're not going to see the kind of dramatic growth that we saw from 2016 to 2018. On the right, you can see our percentage of streets rated 1 to 3. So we rate streets on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, so 1 is not good. In 2016, basically kind of in the inverse of their graph, we had almost about 23% of our streets rated 1 to 3. That has fallen dramatically from 2017 to 2018. But just kind of like the other graph, from 2018 to 2019, we didn't see that much decrease in those ratings. And I would anticipate moving forward, we're going to be at about that 5%. That's about as best as we're going to get. We do have some streets that have very, very little use on the west side of the city, like Frisbee Road and Wilder Drive, that we're not going to be doing a lot of work on. So we're going to kind of continue to see that at 5% moving forward. One other thing I kind of wanted to talk about and just kind of get on everyone's mind is that I think this is a graph showing our ratings from 1 to 10. And what we're going to kind of continue to see moving forward is there's going to kind of be a little bit of a barbell effect where we kind of have a lot of streets, like kind of a mass, that are going to start to degrade at once. And a lot of that has to do because in the 90s and early 2000s, we had a lot of development on the west side of the city. And so that was all built at the same time. And unfortunately, it's degrading. It's still generally in good shape, but that bill's eventually going to come due. So that mass is kind of slowly degrading. And then we're going to kind of have a thin area from like anywhere from 6 to 8, at least right now, where we don't have a lot of streets in that area. And then all the work we've been doing over the past few years, we're going to start seeing 8 and 9, kind of a big mass there. So you can see right now in 2018, we've got about 350 miles that are rated 4 and a 5. Generally, that's pretty good. When we do our work, we primarily do streets that are rated 2 and 3s. We've taken care of a lot of those over the past few years, and so now we're kind of getting into 3s and 4s. And those roads will continue. A lot of the 4s and 5s you see here will continue to get a little bit worse, but I think over the next 4 or 5 years, we're still going to have plenty of work to do, but we're going to be in maintenance mode. Going back to this earlier graph, when this presentation gets given in future years, I would anticipate that we're not going to see continued growth up to 6.5 and 7. At least I'm not anticipating it. We're still going to be in that 6 to 6.5 range on our average pavement rating, and our percentage of streets rated 1 and 3 will probably continue to stay around 5%, maybe go up a little bit above 5 or a little bit below 5. So moving on to this year, this is our project plan, and you can see we have quite a bit of streets in the southeast corner of the city, also on the west side of 435, just south of Shawnee Mission Parkway. One other thing we're trying to do when we develop our program, 3 or 4 years ago, our funding was so tight that we really had to get the worst of the worst. We were looking for streets that absolutely had to be done. Now what we're trying to do is we're trying to group those streets a little bit more. That does a few things for us. It gives us a little bit better prices when contractors don't have to jump all over the place. They can kind of do one area at once. And residents also, we have to cut things off somewhere, but residents get a little frustrated sometimes when they see us come in, do one street. They think they're going to, get an overlay, and then we take off. So we're still looking for streets that need that overlay, but we're trying to do our best to kind of group those together just to improve our program overall. So this is a summary of what we've got planned for this year. We've got 44 total lane miles that we're planning on doing. We've got about another 3 kind of waiting in the wings that we've got extra money. We plan on doing about 55 miles of crack seal and 10,000 feet of curb and gutter and about 4,400 feet of sidewalk repairs. And those are all based on CSRs that we have received throughout the year. We will be doing additional curb and gutter and sidewalk work on the roads that we're actually mill and overlaying, but those final 2 numbers you see there are roads that we're actually, or issues we're addressing based on specific comments from the public. So moving on to our funding, this kind of shows you where everything's coming from. There's a kind of a lot of different funding sources this year. We've got CARS money coming in, federal CDBG money. We do have we're going to be doing some overlay on Schweitzer, and we're going to be entering into a agreement with Merriam, interlocal agreement. So that should be coming before the governing body in the near future. But right now, Merriam is planning on chipping in $510,000 towards that project, and I think our portion is about $360,000. So that's all of our, basically our total funding for the year. We're looking at about $10.1 million through all these sources. And this kind of shows you how that 10.1 is going to be allocated. We've got about 4.4 for mill and overlay. That also includes curb and sidewalk work and sidewalk work on the streets that are actually going to be mill and overlaid. And then you can see we have numbers in there for actually CSR requests, full depth pavement, and then I've got a note in there for the work we're going to be doing on Schweitzer, a breakdown between our funding and Merriam's funding. I also have our street rehabilitation project on 75th Street. There's a variety of funding sources that are going to be funding that project. And then King Street will be our CDBG project this year. And then these are a variety of our kind of one-off contracts that we're going to be doing. We always budget a little bit for bridge maintenance. How much that actually is kind of varies based on inspection report we get from year to year, but we have a kind of a placeholder of $150,000. We also have $150,000 for crack seal. And we've got about $100,000 in there for street rejuvenator. That's a pilot project we did a few years ago where we kind of put some oil down on residential streets. It's kind of a quick process, and once again, it's kind of a surface treatment. It helps kind of just extend the life of the pavement a little bit if we don't have issues underneath the surface. I've also got MAQS in there, about $250,000 that we're looking to do in this year, and I discussed that earlier. We're looking to expand that pilot project a little bit. And we've got about $50,000 in fold-up pavement materials that we're going to be doing in-house. So that's where that $10.1 million is coming from. I'd be happy to answer any questions on this portion of the project.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Jenkins.
Yeah, that one slide shows.
Yes. Yep,
This is kind of a nice visual. I
absolutely.
don't know, about 2 or 3 years worth. I think that'd really be,
Kind of a progression.
When you feel like that, you
Yeah, we've actually got all that information. We have actually developed, we've kind of looked at that map, overlaid everything, and I agree with you. It is it's something that would be nice to share to the public. It kind of provides a nice overall picture.
yeah, just get a nice picture.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Yes, Lisa?
It's actually just a comment. I want to thank you for your focus and commitment on ADA compliance. It is an important issue for our disabled citizens, and you are absolutely right that noncompliance does have significant risk for our city.
Any other comments from council? I have one question for myself, Kevin. You had a real nice graphic there that talked about the ratings of the streets.
Yes.
Yeah, that one right there. How does that stack up with some of our sister cities, Olathe?
You know, I'd have to do some research into that. There's always going to be a little bit of variability
Yeah.
because different cities kind of have different methods of rate. Like some cities may use a scale of 1 to 4. And so we
Okay,
kind of have,
I
you
see
know,
what you're saying.
it's not
Right.
necessarily a universal system, but I
Okay.
can certainly look into that and provide you some information on that if you'd like.
No need to complicate it. If there's different rating systems, it's going to be tough to compare. So while you have that up there, the MAQS process, the Rhino liner for streets, as I like to call it, do you think that will have a more positive impact over the years? What's your assessment of that?
Well, so one of the reasons we're doing that, I kind of talked about that dumbbell and we kind of have that mass.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, we would love to just overlay the same amount of streets every year. And we're hoping to use that MAQS as kind of a tool. If we go in and if we've got a bunch of streets that are rated, 3 to 4, and we know we're going to have to overlay them within the next few years, if we can take some of those and extend their life and push them out
Yep.
and change that dumbbell so it's more flat, that's one of our goals. And so that's one of the things we're going to be using that treatment for, is to kind of help spread our program out so we don't have these peaks and valleys.
Gotcha.
That's easier said than done. I'm not saying it's going to be
Right.
perfect, but that's one of the things we're focused on.
It's a great idea. I like that. It's cool. All right, any other questions from council? Any questions from the public?
Hearing no comments, I would like to move that the council committee forward the proposed 2019 street maintenance program to the governing body.
We have a motion?
Second.
Second. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Second item, staff will discuss the replacement of public safety two-way radios. Police Sergeant Sean Miller will provide an informational presentation on the upcoming replacement of public safety two-way radios. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. So my name is Sean Miller. I'm a sergeant with the police department. I'm currently assigned as the supervisor over communications and dispatch. And we are anticipating a future radio change out to include both portable radios and mobile radios in the car. We anticipate this to happen in the next year or two. As you know, radio communications are an essential part of the job for first responders to respond safely and effectively to any call for service. So I have a brief PowerPoint prepared here just to explain why we're looking to do this. Our current equipment was purchased in 2010, so it's pushing 9 years old, coming up on 9 years old. The estimated service life for our current equipment is 10 years, which I believe to be an acceptable amount of time for this piece of equipment, which we use daily. And I was thinking there's not many pieces of equipment that we have that we don't rotate out sooner than 10 years. So I certainly think we got our use out of these current radios. As the radios are getting older, they are causing more repairs. I've had up to 7 portable radios out of service at one time. They have held up good, but again, as anything ages, they begin to break. The new equipment, these standards were set by the, I'll get into Mars a little bit later in my PowerPoint, but they were set by the Mars Technical Committee. So when we purchase new radios, there's some requirements that need to be made. They need to be phase 2 compatible, which I don't want to get into the details of how our radio system works, but phase 2, we're not there yet. The radio system itself right now is phase 1. When they transition to phase 2, what it does is it decreases the amount of megahertz that's required for the radio to work, and basically we could get twice the amount of radios on the same radio system, if that makes sense. Another requirement is they have to be 700, 800 megahertz, which is what we currently have. They have to be multi-key, which is, it's an encryption. Multi-key is, a key is to decrypt radio transmissions as they're broadcast over the infrastructure. So we have to have AES, and I will get into AES a little bit later in my PowerPoint as well, Advanced Encryption Standard. Right now we have ADP encryption, which is advanced digital privacy. And also we have to have over-the-air rekeying on these new radios, which over-the-air rekeying is so radios can be rekeyed for encryption purposes by RF signals. The benefits of this project would be it would improve interoperability across jurisdictional and state boundaries. We can currently communicate with our partners on the Wyandotte County side and the Kansas City, Missouri side, but we cannot do it with encrypted communications. It's all open air. This would assist us with mutual aid requests, and we would continue to ensure secure interoperability. So the timeline in which this needs to be done. The timeline in which this needs to be done, December 31st of 2018, which is just a few days away, Motorola will stop support on our current 5000 series radios. We don't have many of these radios, so I'm not really concerned about that. We have just a handful. The very large majority of what we have are the 2500 series radios. I would say probably 97% of our radios are 2500 series. Motorola will stop support on those radios next year at the end of 2019. Now, just the fact that they will stop supporting the radios doesn't mean they're going to stop working on those dates. They will continue to work, and this actually needs to be changed. Tech support will be offered, but when they're going to stop manufacturing parts. So when they run out of parts, they're going to stop repairing those radios. So that's one portion, or one part of why we need to upgrade our radios. The second part is, I'm sorry about that. The second part is Johnson County Emergency Management, who manages our current radio system. They are going to implement the new encryption, which our current radios do not have. They are going to implement the new encryption, AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, on October 21st of 2021. If we do not have our new radios by then, we will not be able to communicate with the same agencies that we communicate with now. And then at the end of 2021 in December, the entire network which I'm specifically talking about the Johnson County side of the network right now. There's a Kansas City, Missouri side as well that's managed over there. But the Mars folks will take down the entire ADP encryption and implement the AES encryption at that time. So if we're not prepared for that, we're going to be in the dark as far as radio communications with other agencies. The estimated cost, and this was, these figures are probably 6 months old, so they're a little bit fluid. But the estimated cost for police is $677,000. For police dispatch to update or upgrade our consoles, about $1,600. Fire will be $404,000, and Public Works and Parks about $130,000 for a total of just over $1.2 million. Questions?
All right, thank you, Sean. Yes, Mr. Jenkins.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. It looks like we're coming to a certain point here where everybody needs to get on the same page within the metropolitan area. So a lot of people are going to be perhaps purchasing this equipment. So I just wonder if there's any opportunities there to get together with some other communities and do a larger order, maybe save some dollars or something like that in that regard. Also was curious as to whether or not we could possibly apply for any Homeland Security grants on this, because it's interoperability is a big deal with them, and maybe we could leverage that and perhaps find some money.
You are correct. This is a regional project, metropolitan-wide, so all agencies are in the process or will be going to the new radios, because the federal government, the Office of Interoperability and Communications, and the Federal Communications Commission is not requiring, but they are strongly recommending that all public safety agencies move to this AES encryption, which nobody locally has that right now, to include Johnson County, Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri. So you're right, we are going to be all purchasing radios together. Johnson County Emergency Management, who is kind of the liaison between Motorola and the infrastructure that they built, they did negotiate pricing with Motorola. It's a bundle contract price for Johnson County agencies, so we have already got our feet wet in that sense. As far as the grants, I'm not sure on any law enforcement grants. I know the fire department did apply for a AFG grant. AFG, it's what's the AFG? American Fire Grant. Okay, yeah, the American Fire Grant, and that was denied. And I think it was I'm sorry, I think it was a fire as a collective metro-wide. It wasn't just Shawnee.
Okay, because it kind of fits under some of that anti-terrorism stuff. You got to have adequate communications. There's a lot of ways to tie this to things, based on the fact I used to run that program for FEMA, that grant program, and this might be something that would work. I mean, I'm not saying it will or it won't work, but I think it'd be worth taking a shot at it and getting an application and saying, hey, can we get some funding support on, this is a lot of money. We could buy a fire engine for that, for this price. So I think it's necessary. We got to do it. So it's not like we're not going to do it, but boy, if we could find some way to kind of ease the cost, it'd be great.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from council? Mr. Neighbor?
There appears to be.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Lisa?
Can you tell me whether there are any state or federal regulations that we are currently out of compliance with using the technology that we have now? Because boy, 10 years, a lot of things can change in 10 years.
I am not aware of any, no.
Great.
Any other comments from council? Comments from the public? All right. Sergeant Miller, thank you very much. This is for informational purposes only, so no action is required, and the item will be reviewed during the 2019-20 budget discussions. Third item, staff will discuss the 2019 state legislative program. Assistant City Manager Caitlin Gard will present the information about issues and priorities for the 2019 state legislative program. Caitlin, before you get rolling here, I think there's about 20 items on the agenda. And rather than, once Caitlin's done with this, what I'd like to do is treat this as a consent agenda and we can approve the whole thing all at once. I'll ask if we want to take something off before we do that. So as we move through this, try and get our questions out of the way. So Caitlin, she's all yours. Take it away.
Colder or warmer? Makes it warmer. I do, actually.
I'll give you $20 if you wear that.
Oh, $20. Sold, yeah. All right, I think we fixed it. So tonight we're here to discuss the 2019 state legislative program. Draft of that program is provided in your packet memo, and we'll discuss a little bit about it tonight. There was one change since the packet has been published, and we'll discuss that this evening. Just a little summary, we do have a couple new representatives this year that represent Shawnee. In District 23, we have Representative Susan Ruiz, and in 39, we have Representative Owen Donahoe. Otherwise, everybody's the same, so we'll continue to have relationships with those representatives and senators moving forward this year as well. Just a map of our house, our district map for the House. 39, 17, 18, and 23 are those that cover Shawnee. And then just one senator for Shawnee as well. As far as how our program was developed, similar to in years past, all that we've done is we've started with the previous year's program, looked at any legislation that either passed or didn't pass last year, any discussions that they had, and what that looks like moving forward in the future, kind of incorporated all that information. We also spoke with our neighboring cities, other cities in the metropolitan area, also the league. And the county has a joint city-county platform. They actually haven't released their 2019 platform at this time, so we're still utilizing their 2018 platform. We don't think a lot has changed, so we just wanted to make sure to incorporate that. A number of us attend the League of Kansas Municipalities State Programs meetings, along with the Shawnee Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, and then also a number of people provide input to this program, council and staff. So there are a few sections in our draft program. All of them are the same as last year. We did add one this year, which is a section regarding energy. And we did pull that straight from the league. Also added a section this year regarding energy. We just felt like that was something that the council wanted to move forward with at this time. So we have a few changes from the 2018 program. We actually have 4 changes. None of them are removals. So anything that we put in the program this year was an addition. 2 of those are in the finance and taxation portion of the program. The first one is internet sales tax collections regarding the city to be able to collect local sales tax on internet sales. And then also anything regarding the dark store theory and then alternative property valuations. So at this time, we can talk about these 2 items if anybody has any questions or comments.
Any questions from the council on either of those 2 items? All right. Proceed.
Additionally, as I just mentioned, we did add a section regarding energy. This language is also taken from the League of Kansas Municipalities program regarding statewide energy policy and energy efficiencies. Councilmember Constance did request that we expand on the language for energy efficiencies to include a language that includes policies for businesses and homeowners to invest in alternative energy. So we did add that language, and so that language was not in your packet memo, and it is going to be included moving forward with the program.
Stephanie.
Yeah, can I ask a question about that? Just wanted to get a little bit more background on what led to the addition, Lindsay, if you want to.
So a couple of things. I know Mid-America Regional Council right now is doing their survey on air quality and looking as a region at improving that. So they're sending those surveys out. So I think that encouraging people to invest in technology that is more fuel efficient, that is cleaner, improves our air quality, and it goes along with that regional approach. Also, with potential increases in utility costs, I think we need to allow homeowners and businesses to invest in renewables if they feel that that's a good fit for their business or for their own home, so that they can power their homes in a more cost-effective manner. I know there's been some discussion and possibility in 2019 of putting additional fees on homeowners who do decide to do solar panels for their homes. So rather than encouraging homeowners to do something that's more cost-effective for them, better for the environment, it's actually impeding that progress and impeding that technological advancement. I think we know that energy costs are going to continue to rise. So I think as a state, we need to be looking at renewables. Kansas is second in wind potential. I know at least 3 out of 4 of our representatives do have energy as one of their top priorities. I talked with Representative Tom Cox about it a couple weeks ago. He said it's one of the things he wants to push for. So I think that it's in line with, what municipalities are doing, what many of our representatives are looking for. So I just kind of liked adding a little bit more to that.
I see what you're saying. I'm just curious if there was something that I'm looking at the imposing additional fees or barriers. What is there potential legislation that's aimed at? I just don't want us to be overly specific in the platform.
So the additional barrier would also be the Transportation Task Force was discussing the possibility of an additional fee for people that choose to drive electric vehicles. And then that solar cost that I was mentioning, in which they want on the Kansas side to impose an additional fee on homeowners who choose to put up solar panels. So those would be kind of the specifics, but I like the language being more general, just basically saying we want to encourage rather than dissuade this, because it's good for us as a state.
I guess I would, and I appreciate that. I'm glad we're adding energy writ large. I think I would probably still support the league statement without the additional, mainly because I'm thinking of the transportation plan as well. And I'm torn. I drive a hybrid as well. So I understand that the transportation plan needs to be funded, and traditionally it has been funded through a gas tax, which is going to be decreasing as more people drive hybrids. And I want us to maintain well-funded roads and well-maintained roads in the state. So I'm not necessarily opposed to, I guess I'll just speak for myself, necessarily opposed to an increased fee for hybrid or electric vehicles to help compensate that, to make sure that we have the resources necessary to continue to have a quality infrastructure.
I would like to encourage our state representatives to look at other ways to fund our roads rather than imposing a tax on folks who choose more fuel efficient vehicles. That's my thought. If it's a priority, which it is, I think we can find other options if people choose to drive more fuel efficient vehicles. And also by cleaning up our air, that's going to have other added benefits to health, which I think far outweigh the other side. So.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yeah, I'd like to echo Councilwoman Meyer's comments. I mean, this, I think it's too specific right here, this added part. I read the article in the Kansas City Star about the Missouri efforts to try to fund their roads. And one of the options on the table for them is looking at perhaps putting fees on some of the highly energy efficient vehicles, electric cars and so on, because they're using the roads and wearing them out along with everybody else, but they're not helping with the gas tax part of it to help fund the maintenance of those roads. So there's a number of states that are looking at the same kinds of issues. So I don't know if I want to get that specific in here. I don't like to leave it open to the legislature. I mean, we say, yeah, we'll support energy efficiency by local governments in the state. That's great. But then when we start getting down in the weeds, I think we start trying to tie people's hands a little bit on how they're going to try to handle those various things. So that's just my comments.
Any other comments? Yes, Lisa.
Another way that you could look at this is actually being very pro-business for the state of Kansas. And specifically, I'm talking about the use of renewable energies such as wind and solar. As Councilwoman Constance mentioned, Kansas is rated number 2 in the country for solar potential, and that is something that we both use internally for the state of Kansas residents and as an export. And we've actually attracted a lot of really big businesses that are doing this renewable energy. And what we're saying here is that we also want to support those businesses by saying, we're going to help our citizens use your services. So that's just another twist on a way of looking at this.
Yes, Ms. Meyer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think that that is a laudable goal and something we want to do. I do still think that it can be accomplished by the general statement without the additional barrier. I know transportation is going to come up, and I think that we want to have all of our options on the table to make sure that we are maintaining quality roads. And I think we can accomplish all of the energy benefits without putting us in a position where we might be against a funding solution at the state level.
Yes, Mickey.
Number one, the state hasn't really been real enthusiastic about listening to us anyway. Number two, I would have to agree to the point of, I think all the vehicles on the road that are wearing the road out should all have a fee to pay to them. Now, if it could be isolated out just to the electric vehicles that are driving on the road, and the gas vehicles, that I don't see that being a big issue. In the wording, I think if we could keep it in a general to a point, I agree to some of it, but I wouldn't want to. I don't think we need to get in line of trying to tell them to stop, not to try to impose anything on electric vehicles, because I think that they probably ought to pay just as well as we are.
I guess my issue is there isn't, well, I don't think we need to get into vehicles. If we are going to generalize, I would like to include something as far as support for renewable energy, because the first portion speaks about energy efficiency, but it doesn't speak about our support of renewable energy. And like we mentioned, with Kansas being second in wind potential, I think it's important for our state representatives to be advocating for that.
So,
I mean, maybe make it a little more general, but I think it's important.
I agree.
So a comment from myself, we've been talking about cars, and it's funny because when I first read this, the first thing that popped into my head was actually solar panels. And there's issues with making solar panels, extending the payback period so it's not much of an incentive to put a solar panel on. Holding that thought in mind just for a minute, you might recall that we've got a big performance contract effort underway for our city. One of the things on that effort is to put solar collectors on our new Justice Center. It's got quite a good payback on it. Bringing this full circle, and I think touching on where Lindsay wants to go with this, we need something that is going to prevent KCP&L from playing a game that makes renewable energy less affordable and less incentive to get it done. So I think we need to have something in here that gets that covered. So. Now that's nothing to do with vehicles. I do understand the comment about vehicles, but maybe we just need to rework the verbiage here to cover that. Yeah. So. Mr. Neighbor.
Yeah, and Caitlin, this throw it to you. I think you've got sort of a consensus here, which I would agree with. But I also believe that you're going to meet with a number of these people here in the next few days to talk about this, and perhaps going forward for when it comes in front of the council, or is that on Monday night?
Yeah, it'll be on Monday night's agenda.
That's not enough
And then I think in Monday night's packet memo, I discussed that I'll be scheduling meetings with our representatives and senator. Obviously, a number of the council members will be invited to that as well. They just haven't been scheduled.
I just was thinking perhaps you could get a feel from them on this issue that might be able to make your wording a little more succinct or.
Yeah, we can look over it
Specific.
within the next couple of days and try and come up with some language that just specifically discusses renewable energy.
Because that will be in the packet again
Yeah, absolutely.
on the 10th.
Yeah,
Ms. Maria.
thank you. It seems like we could just include in that, under energy efficiency, in that first sentence, something about support of renewable energy as well, and accomplish support of that without being overly restrictive.
Any other comments from council? Any comments from public? All right,
Couple more slides. Man.
thank you. Jumping the gun.
As I did mention, we're going to fast track this item to the December 10th, so Monday's council meeting. We don't normally do something like this, but since the session's going to begin January 14th, we wanted to make sure that we had this approved, so when we do meet with our legislators, we can provide them this information. And you will be seeing some meeting invites and times regarding those meetings as well. And then as the session begins and continues, we're obviously going to provide updates to the city manager and to the council as well, and all of you will be involved in that. So with that, I'll give it back to Councilmember Zimmerman, and you guys can discuss.
All right, as you can see from the screen in front of you, we have, I believe that's 20 or 21 items. What I'd like to do is treat this again as we do the consent agenda, vote to move these forward all at once. But first, is there any item on here that anybody would like to have removed from the agenda prior to voting on it?
Ask a question
Go ahead.
about it. That's the alternative. Help me with this, but that final piece of it. More, I mean, I'm really, it doesn't seem right.
I believe what it's referencing is the dark store theory, and that there's three basically approved or identified methods to evaluating a property. And so I think the income is more in reference to the property and the location than necessarily how the business is operating, is my understanding.
Location.
Good, so it's doing better, or?
Oh, it might just be traffic. I think it's looking at sort of the one of these three basically approved valuation methods for basically identifying the value of the property. I don't think it has necessarily to do with the neighborhood itself, but maybe just traffic, corner location, those kind of things in terms of visibility.
That doesn't affect your property values? So I would think that would affect your property values, your location. I mean, it affects property values across the country. I don't know why it would affect the property values as far as this is concerned. If you got a prime location,
No, I'm
your
saying-
property's worth more.
Right.
But is it not correct that there's, this comes out of a couple of rulings out of Sedgwick County on the dark store theory, and this is to try to get a handle around so it is consistent throughout the state?
Correct.
And get it, more understandable for everyone going forward? And I don't think they understand it up there either, so it's talked
No,
about.
I
Well,
don't
it's
have
a
I don't really have a
combination.
good, strong grasp of what this is.
don't think
This is
anybody
where I'm having a
does.
little bit of a problem, because I don't really understand where they're coming from on some of this stuff. And, I mean, I get the gist of it, but I don't know if I get the specifics of it. I guess where I'm at.
My understanding, it's actually a combination of the three methods as they assess the value. It's not an easy thing to assess. I wish I knew more details about it. I can't.
Yeah, well, that's the way I am. I don't know enough details about it, but here I am recommending it, but,
Well, and so-
I don't know if that's appropriate for me to recommend something. I don't even know what I'm talking about.
So the issue with the dark store, and I'm not obviously a property appraiser, but it's apparently within their associations or jurisdictions that they operate under, there's what they consider kind of approved methods to evaluate property and value that. And so with the issue with the dark store theory, essentially it's saying that a dark store, a vacant store, should have basically using that same value for a store that's fully operational at a different location, And so that, basically you have a large big box saying, hey, on the other side of town or in a neighboring community, even though that store is vacant, nobody's there, whatever you're valuing that property at, you should value my property at. And although it might be in a completely different location, completely different traffic counts, they're saying that they should use that as a comp versus what they would normally use as a comp. And so it's created a lot of different issues throughout the state, as the case that Councilmember Neighbor referenced as Sedgwick County. The dark store theory was successful, if you will. There's cases here in Johnson County that are pending appeal. There's a case that the dark store theory lost, I believe, out of Manhattan. I think Manhattan came versus Riley County or Potawatomi County. Menards lost a case in reference to big box. There's a lot of different things as you kind of peel that back. And there's deed restrictions on property, and so you have somebody that may have a fast food restaurant that closes and builds a new one next to it, but they put a deed restriction on the property that it can't be a fast food location. So obviously that hinders what could be developed there. And so they're saying, well, even though it's dark, that it should be valued differently, even though that a deed restriction is controlling that property. A lot of times in big boxes, sometimes Walmart will put a deed restriction on property that it can't be another discount retailer in perpetuity for the life of the property. And so that creates an issue too when you have a box of that size and it can't be another discount retailer. So it really devalues the property based on the owner driving that property value, not necessarily the market conditions.
That actually helps some, Nolan, thanks. That does kind of fill in some of my blanks anyway.
Mr. Neighbor.
Kayla again suggested, could you on Monday night maybe expand a little bit on it? Or in the packet for Monday night, expand on this so that we could digest it some more?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just one other comment on that too. Is there any way we can get any feedback on how this sits with the business community? Because I know we want to be a business-friendly community. Is this something that our businesses are going to be good with? I mean, this is,
I don't remember the wording, but I think the chamber specifically addressed this in their legislative agenda.
Yeah, and I can
And-
provide you guys that language.
Yeah.
It's, I think, really similar, if I remember correctly. I don't have it in front of me, but it's very similar to this language as well.
That'd be useful, thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other comments, questions, any comments from the public? All right, Caitlin, thank you. Staff is recommending fast-tracking the 2019 state legislative program to the governing body at the December 10th meeting with the recommendation to adopt. The item is fast-tracked in order to schedule and meet with the state delegation prior to the holidays in the legislative session beginning in January. So I will accept a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes with one dissenting vote from Mr. Kemling. Last item on this is from staff will provide a community center update. Deputy Parks and Recreation Director Tanya will provide an update on the progress of Phase 1 since the October meeting. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you very much. This is just going to be a really quick, I promise, update to where we've been. We were here in October and kind of gave you an update of our plans, where we were standing at that time. And this is just a really quick update to tell you what we've done the last couple of months and where we're going to hit that February 11th, that due date. So in October, since we've seen you in October, the Park and Recreation Advisory Board saw a presentation on the plans for this. We have our owner's rep selected. The design team contract was signed. We saw some preliminary design concepts, and we've worked through those. We just last week had our third meeting on that, and then we did our CMR interviews. So as you all know, because you approved it, we are continuing our relationship with the design team headed by Perkins and Will. And we looked at the preliminary design options on October 24th. And there was two basic concepts that we kind of looked at, and we've merged those a little bit together, and we'll be bringing those to you after the first of the year. But very excited about what we're seeing, how that's moving forward. Our owner's rep was selected, and we did the interviews October 11th, and we selected project advocates. Our representatives are Radway and Sam McCord, and they have really been very beneficial to the team, keeping us moving forward, keeping all of the pieces going, and making sure that we're meeting our deadlines and things like that. So as you know, this initial phase that was approved was for phase 1, provided that the ballot is approved and goes and passes, then there would be a phase 2 that we would bring it back to you for approval at that time as well. And then our construction manager as a contractor was interviewed in October. We interviewed 3 different firms, J.E. Dunn, McCowan Gordon, and McCarthy. We did in-person interviews with those. We were entertained by Halloween costumes by one of our firms, so that was kind of a fun way to do that. But they all put a really good package together, and we went through that. But as we went through, so in November we did select J.E. Dunn as our CMC, and that was approved back on the 13th of November. I attended the Athletic Business Conference in early November in New Orleans. It's a great opportunity to kind of see all of the different community centers, recreation facilities that are in universities, as well as municipalities and private organizations as well. So you get that firsthand experience to see what people are using out there, a lot of best practices. So I feel like it was a really valuable conference for us to attend and to see. Made a lot of really good contacts, talked to a lot of folks about getting what to do, what not to do, which I think is even more important than other ones. So we will be seeing some of those things as we come back with our design. As you know, with the discussion with USD 232 for the competitive pool edition, that the school district did decline partnering with us at this time. So that helped us. We went back a little bit with that final decision to go back with the design, removing the competitive lanes, but really working and focusing on what that aquatic component would be for the community. And I think you're going to be very pleased with the exciting opportunities that we have for that. So we'll be bringing those there. So last week, on October 29th, we did meet with our third design meeting and also did the design charrette for the aquatics component. We're still looking at that flow rider for you, so it has something exciting there. So, but trying to use all of the facility as much as we can to reach the public where the needs are and what people are wanting to see and stuff like that. We also met with the city's development team to talk about floodplain requirements with the maximum 100-year flood. So all of those things, again, the whole team together with our construction manager as well as our owner's rep has really helped us make sure that we're staying focused on those. So as you can see here, then our schedule moving forward, next week on December 12th, which is Wednesday morning between 8 and noon, we're going to be touring a few neighboring community centers with the mayor. And I'd like to, if anyone else would like to attend with us, you're more than welcome. We're going to start with Mill Creek Activity Center. I know this last month we've had an article in the newspaper regarding the Civic Center. Is it a community center, a rec center, or is it a rental facility? So we want to really show what's out there and how we compare in those different areas and what this new facility could bring to the community. So we'll be starting with Mill Creek Activity Center, visiting Lenexa, Olathe, and then Matt Ross over in Olathe, or in Overland Park. So they all have a lot of amenities that are unique to their facilities, but also kind of give us an idea of how we can stack up with those as we move forward. So December 13th will be our owners meeting, number 4, design review. Again, each time it gets a little bit better. We're tweaking a little bit, working on the size. We're right now about 64,000 square feet, which includes the aquatic component as well as some of the outdoor amenities that we're working on that will lead to the facility. We plan on turning over this information to J.E. Dunn on the December 17th so that they have a month's time to start working on that cost estimating, looking at options, alternatives, cost savings, best practices that we can do for these different areas. January 3rd, we have a conference call that we'll start talking about our education for the public. Again, we will not campaign for or against this project, but we will educate. So make sure everyone has the information that they need to make the best choice for their family and their household. So this is a really important component as we move forward, because once we have that number and we bring it to you for the ballot question between then and May, we need to make sure that the information is accurate, it's transparent, and it's out there so people can make good decisions. So, and with that starting, then on January 15th and 16th, we'll be having public meetings like we did when we did the Build-A-Center early in the process. The January 15th will be at Shawnee Mission Northwest. That's at 5:30, I believe. And then on the 16th, we'll do that similar, it says Monticello Springs again, Monticello Trails, sorry, I didn't update that, Monticello Trails Middle School on the 16th. So same process at both locations, but giving people the opportunity 2 different times to come out and to see that. We will have conceptual drawings at that, not necessarily complete drawings, but not colors and all those things, but really give them a good idea of what's going to be in this facility. So again, they can make their choice. January 17th will be our 5th meeting with the design team, and that's where we'll be going over that not-to-exceed cost review, making sure that we've addressed all of the different issues that we think needs to be included so that when we come to you in February with the number, you can feel confident that if we say we can build it for this, that's what it's going to cost. So, and then so February 7th, we will have a presentation to the park board, kind of run through it, get their questions, get their feedback, get their recommendations, and then bring it to you again on February 11th with the ballot verbiage so that we can move that forward to the county. Any questions?
All right. Thank you, Tanya. Any questions from council? Yes, Stephanie.
Thank you. Not really a question, but more of a comment. Thank you. And I wanted to commend the staff specifically for all of the work that has gone into this, but very specifically on the conversations with USD 232 regarding the lap pool. You all did a tremendous amount of work leading up to that, and it's unfortunate that the school district made the decision fairly late in the game to change their mind. I'm sad for our residents. But I thank you all for, I know a ton of work went into what ultimately didn't come to fruition, so thank you guys for that.
I would echo that sentiment. Any other comments or questions? All right, anybody from the public like to speak on this item? All right, if not, that was for informational purposes only. No further action is required, and that does conclude the agenda. So I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting is adjourned.